Hi, this is Shannon Perry, and welcome to the Audiotocracy podcast. It's January, and that means it's National Blood Donor Month. So we want to remind folks to go ahead and make that appointment to donate blood, platelets, or plasma if you're able to. If you're not sure of your eligibility, check the website of Bloodworks Northwest to find out. That's bloodworksnw.org. My guest today is Curtis Bailey, President and CEO of Bloodworks Northwest, and he is one of those people who make me wonder what I've been doing with my life. Kurt Bailey has been in healthcare in one form or another for many years. He's advised healthcare companies across the U.S., focusing particularly on serving nonprofits and community-based and academic healthcare institutions. Partner at McKinsey & Company, former helicopter pilot in the U.S. Marine Corps, MBA from Yale, and a Seattleite since 2002, Kurt is as delightful as he is impressive, even if he doesn't know Macklemore. Please join me in welcoming Kurt Bailey. Curtis Bailey, welcome and thank you for joining us today to talk about Bloodworks Northwest.
Well, it's my pleasure to join you, Shannon. Thank you for having me.
As you know, January is Blood Donor Month, or Blood Donor Awareness Month, I think. So have I got that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we wanted to make sure we got this episode out in January so people know that as soon as the New Year's Eve alcohol clears your system, you should go and donate some blood.
And we'd love to see the community come on out and donate in January. It's an important month in two ways. The first is it's important to call the nation's attention to the need for blood, which is needed every day in every community around the country. And, if we don't continue to remind people of how important it is to keeping all of us healthy, we lose the habit as a nation. And so January is the month in which we remind everybody, hey, part of being a member of this community is we take care of one another, and we take care of one another in lots of ways, but one is we go ahead and we donate blood. And maybe why January? Well, I don't know why January was picked, but I'm glad they picked January, whoever did, because oftentimes the blood supply dips a bit over the holidays. Which you can understand.
Sure.
People are busy, they're traveling, their minds are on other things, and so reminding everybody to donate in January serves that second purpose of we often need to replenish the blood stocks across the nation in January to make up for the holiday shortfall.
Gotcha. Is there a higher demand at this time of year because of holidays?
No, not generally.
Good.
Yeah, not generally.
Okay.
It's not a higher demand. We do sometimes see a higher demand in the summer, not a lot, but some, and typically that's because folks are on the road more and there's more auto accidents with bleeding trauma.
That makes sense.
But automobiles are an awful lot safer than they were in decades past, and so an interesting and really positive fact is less blood's needed for auto accidents than ever before.
That's great. So I read on your website that it takes 1,000 donors a day to maintain a healthy supply, and I'm not sure what area that covers, but why does the world need so much blood?
Well, despite the kind of advances I mentioned in automobile safety that's reduced the need for blood for, say, auto accident bleeding trauma, other needs for blood are increasing. A third of blood is used for cancer treatment.
Really?
And many cancer treatments impair the patient's ability to make and keep healthy blood cells of different kinds. And as a consequence, patients wouldn't necessarily survive their cancer treatment if they didn't get transfused. So 1/3 of blood will go to cancer.
Wow.
And as the population ages and as life expectancy extends, well, that actually means that more of us are likely to get cancer in old age because it does tend to be a disease of old age. And so the need for blood components for our society, therefore, will also increase. Blood's also used for transplant, as you can imagine. Now, transplant has become a really astonishingly efficient procedure in terms of how much blood is used. It used to be that over 100 units could be used for a liver transplant easily.
Wow.
Nowadays, far less is used. However, we do a lot more transplants, and particularly in this part of the country, which has a growing population, transplant volumes, for example, in Seattle, are higher than ever before.
Wow.
Another very important and worrisome increasing need for blood is for women with postpartum hemorrhage.
Ooh.
So we don't, I think, really understand why it has increased so dramatically, but we do see across the population, without variation by ethnicity or other factors that we can discern, a material increase in the number of mothers with dangerous bleeding at delivery.
Wow.
And so blood is used to save their life. or at least allow them to restore to health much more quickly than if we didn't have those blood components available for transfusion. And so on and so forth. And so really blood is a foundation of Western medicine, and 1 out of, say, 6 Americans will get transfused in their lifetime. And if you think about that, that probably means someone in your immediate family and someone in my immediate family will need blood. So one of the reasons I donate is to think, hey, you know what, I'm paying it forward. Someday I may need it, someday a loved one may need it. And so even if my blood goes to a stranger tomorrow, some stranger's going to give it back in that future day when we need it.
Right. Oh, it's a really powerful way of thinking about it. I'm just going to quote unquote bank this for someone I care about, whether it goes to them directly or indirectly. Yeah, that's amazing. Can you tell us about a time when blood was urgently needed? Maybe a time during your tenure there?
Blood is urgently needed, in a sense, in 2 different situations. So we had a day not too long ago where we had a transplant case with a lot of bleeding complications, and we had a really severe bleeding trauma from an auto accident. And when that happens on the same day, and when the patient is type O, that drains the blood supply really quickly. And it's at that point where you want to make sure you have enough in stock, and you want to be able to communicate to the community that additional blood will be needed for other patients as well, and have the community turn out to donate. And generally speaking, actually, those are well handled. We keep enough extra that it doesn't become an emergency, and the community is wonderfully responsive.
That's great.
In those circumstances. But we have to be careful. And so we have to manage that inventory level carefully so that we can accommodate, we can keep patients safe and alive on those days. Honestly, Shannon, the days that worry me a lot more, which is a little counterintuitive, is the succession of days in which, for whatever reason, donors can't or don't come out to donate. And we see a succession of days with below average donations. And that's when the amount of blood supply in the region or in the nation dips down lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. And pretty soon you're at a really worrisome level. And if there were a concurrent pair of bleeding traumas or bleeding complications during transplant surgery or what have you, the community would be hard pressed to support it. And those patients could have a really bad outcome.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, my understanding of how this whole process works is based on too many episodes of Grey's Anatomy, where there are multiple people involved in a massive car pileup accident. And that's when that's when the real demand hits. But you're saying it doesn't need to be anything like that number. It could be a couple of patients with, a high need for blood transfusion.
It could. And if it happens on those days when the regional and national blood stocks have been depleted, that's the situation that frightens me the most.
Sure.
We've had a couple close calls.
Wow.
And we're at a situation as a nation where we're going to have some more in the future. So what happened over the course of the last, say, 12 months is there was a significant increase in the use of blood in the first half of the calendar year, likely due to deferred care because of COVID and or exacerbated conditions that they got worse, and the patient's condition then required them to be transfused or transfused more. So we had higher blood use by the nation in the early half of this year. And then in the latter half of this year, we had the Great Resignation, and the number of persons in the country who are working collecting blood has dropped quite noticeably.
Oh, yikes.
And for many parts of the country, we still don't have businesses back with employees, at their offices, able to host a mobile blood drive. And our school blood drive programs are restarting, but they're not in full swing. And as a consequence, the blood supply for the nation has slowly declined, really for the last, 4 to 6 months. And that's true in this region too.
Wow.
It's a national phenomenon. I don't think any area is exempt from this. And now the worry becomes, what happens if we have high demand for blood? And if that happens in multiple parts of the country for whatever reason, or if there's a natural disaster and we get no donations in that part of the country, it's going to be a really difficult situation.
Wow.
So my sort of plea to your listeners is go make an appointment. Go make it right now. Doesn't matter whether it's for tomorrow or whether it's for next month. The important thing is you make the appointment. That's the win. Make the appointment.
Okay.
And then the second win is keep your appointment. Make your appointment, keep your appointment. And then the third win, this is the home run, is ask a friend or family member to do the same thing. Make your appointment, keep your appointment, get a friend to do the same. And if we do that, we're going to get the country back into a much better place.
Wow. So was there a time maybe earlier in COVID when people couldn't donate at all? When they were concerned about maybe the disease was transmitted through the blood, or did it shut down at any point?
Not for that reason. Coronaviruses are not transfusion transmissible.
Right.
They just don't pass through the transfused product that way. We actually knew that from earlier coronaviruses from years before. So that was never a concern.
Okay.
The concern we had was simply, hey, how do we keep everybody safe, both our staff as well as our donors? And we resolved that pretty quickly too. We have no known transmission of COVID in our spaces between donors or staff.
Wow.
And we did that by making sure our spaces were really, really open. We actually took beds out of service. We removed them. We took chairs out. We removed those so that people couldn't get too close. And we went to appointment only in order to make sure we never had too many people in the center. We've been masked, since the early days of the pandemic. We never stopped masking in our centers, and we'll continue with that. And we have 100% vaccination amongst all of our staff, except those with a medical or religious exemption.
Wow.
And so we've done everything we can, we think, in order to keep people safe. And the proof is no known transmission of COVID-19 in our spaces.
Right. It sounds like it's working. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine people being concerned about even just coming in to donate, being, any place that's public these days. Certainly in the early days of COVID, people were very nervous about being any place that was outside their home for a lot of folks. Can you tell me what is the path of a blood donation? So what happens to my blood after it leaves my body?
Well, Shannon, I think this is just the most fascinating thing. And I think it's fascinating because human beings over the course of decades have figured out how to transfuse patients with a blood supply that's safe and plentiful. And today, thousands of people are going to donate around the country, but even more people are going to be helping ensure that that donation gets into another human, which I just think is a super cool example of how our society brings out the best of humanity. So you come on in and you donate, and when you donate, you might donate platelets. Those are the things that help you clot. You might donate plasma. You might donate whole blood. And if you donate whole blood, that blood is going to get separated out into its components, and in particular, into red blood cells.
Okay.
And the way modern medicine works is called component therapy. Patients are transfused with either platelets or plasma or red blood cells or a few other things, but they're really not transfused with whole blood very often at all.
Oh, okay.
You're transfused by the components.
Got it.
In case of a whole blood donation, how do we get the components? How do we get the red blood cells? Well, you donate, blood goes in the bag goes down to our processing facility here in the Seattle area, and through a variety of processes, the components of your blood are separated out, and what remains is units of red blood cells, units of plasma, units of platelets, and other things.
Okay.
At that point, what's happening at the same time is the blood's being tested.
Right.
We're typing the blood, figure out what blood type it is, and we're also testing it for infectious disease. And that happens also at our processing facility at the same time.
Okay.
And the test results come back, they get married up with the unit of blood, say a unit of platelets, and confirm that it is a safe unit, or if it's with a red cell, it's a safe unit and what the blood type is. And then from there, it goes to our storeroom, so to speak. It's refrigerators in the case of the red blood cells, or it's these shakers. They look kind of like giant toaster ovens, I think. But anyway, that's where the platelets get stored, and they get shaken continuously to keep them moving.
Oh, wow.
And then the hospitals call in an order and say, hey, we need the following components, and we pack them up, and our couriers then distribute those packages of blood to hospitals up and down Washington and Oregon. Once in the
Okay.
hospital, they go into the blood bank, and in some cases, Bloodworks actually runs the in-hospital blood bank. But regardless of whether we do it or whether the hospital does it themselves, when the order comes in for blood for a patient to be transfused, then sure enough, it's sent up to the floor. And the donation that occurred maybe a few days before is transfused into another human being. And I find that whole
Wow.
process operationally fascinating and a scientific marvel, but more than anything else, really an inspiring story of humanity.
Yeah, that's amazing. Is the blood treated in any way? I mean, apart from being separated out, is anything added to it?
Not really, no. In
No.
some cases, yes, but for all practical purposes for this conversation, no, it's
Mhm.
really not.
Wow. That is fascinating. It just seems like such a personal thing, and to think that, it really is fairly universal. We can all use each
Yeah,
other's
we
to a
can,
limited
and
extent, I realize, but yeah.
well, thanks for the opening, because I will say we know from our survey research that many people believe they're not eligible to donate blood,
Really?
and we also know that a lot more people are eligible than they think. So that's a false belief for a lot of people that they're not eligible. They probably are. And in fact, over the last 2 years, the FDA has loosened some of the restrictions on donating blood. And so those persons who truly were not eligible to donate in the past may well be eligible today. So my plea to your listeners is, don't assume you're not eligible. Please go check
Mhm.
and make your appointment. It's better you make the appointment and find out for sure than to assume you're
Mhm.
not eligible when the truth is you are.
What are the reasons people think they may not be?
Oftentimes it has to do with travel out of the country, and there are still deferral periods
Ah,
for certain travel, but it's a lot shorter than it used to be.
okay.
It can be tattooing, piercing. Those two have also changed.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
sometimes people think that they have a chronic disease that doesn't allow them to donate, and it's true that some don't, but not all
Mhm.
of them. So it's really
Mhm.
worth checking to make sure.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed you have an amazing font of information on your website too about these kinds of questions.
Indeed.
So if you have any concerns, specific concerns, it really pays to go check your website, because the information there is very up to date and very easy to understand. It really breaks it down. So I know that a lot of people are fearful of giving blood for reasons of needles or whatever, but what are some of the common fears, or what are fears that you've heard of, and how do you get people in, and once they're in, how do you get them to sit still?
Well, the fear of needles is the most prevalent.
Mhm.
Some people also don't like the sight
Mhm.
of blood.
Mhm.
And, we all react to things in our world in different ways. And there's no way that Bloodworks is going to convince somebody not to be afraid of something. But what
Right.
we can do is make it as good of an experience as possible. We do this a lot.
Right.
And our blood collection specialists, the friendly folk with the needles, they've been doing this a long time.
Mhm.
And so they're really good at it.
Mhm.
They know how to do it in a way that minimizes any discomfort.
Mhm.
They know how to talk to people in order to keep them comfortable and relaxed while they're doing their donation.
Mhm.
And we do it in a setting that is, really very calm, generally pretty quiet. It's not crowded. You're relaxed on the bed. And I think our employees are pretty charming. And so when I go to donate, I usually enjoy having a chat, with the blood collection specialist who
Right.
happens to be drawing my donation.
Right.
In my case, I donate a lot, and I donated Monday, and my colleague here at Bloodworks, Jean, she drew my donation, and we've continued to become friends over the years, and we had a lovely conversation about pies, or our favorite pies. And my point with that silly story, Shannon, is that it's a really friendly thing,
Mhm.
and it can be really a very pleasant social activity as well.
Yeah. And I have to admit that the capability of the drawers to do it almost painlessly has just been incredible. Like, I gave blood 30 years ago as a college student, and that was not the most pleasant of experiences, and have done so more recently as an adult, and it is just night and day different. The procedures are better, the needles may be smaller. I don't know what's changed. Maybe I'm just a little more of a grown-up, but it is not an unpleasant experience. And certainly leaving there feeling very good about the world is a nice bonus.
It sure is. Well, another somewhat silly story, but I think a helpful one, perhaps. I happened to stub my little toe the other day.
Ouch. Uh-huh.
And when I stubbed my little toe the other day, it occurred to me, because I had donated not long before, that was a markedly more painful event, stubbing my toe, than a needle stick.
Right.
And no comparison. So if I can
Right.
withstand a toe stub, a needle's nothing.
Right. And nobody benefits from the toe stub, right? Like there's no good out of that. I didn't save someone else from stubbing their toe, right? So have you ever been on the Bloodmobile, and can you tell us a little bit what that experience is like?
I have. I should be clear, though, to say that we are not using our bloodmobiles today, and we're just not comfortable
Mm-hmm.
given the confined nature of a blood bus. You know, you can't social distance in a
Right.
bloodmobile,
Right.
and we just don't think it's prudent in this time to use them, so we don't use them right now.
Okay.
However, when we were using blood buses, what I really enjoyed about them was the convivial atmosphere.
Mm.
And sometimes it's the music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll have the music rocking out on the blood bus, and you can't help but moving a little bit to the beat, and you know, that's kind of fun. And then sometimes what I like is just sort of going on to the blood bus and hanging out and talking to people, and you have just charming conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on the blood bus, I think in the late 2019, maybe it was just into 2020, and opposite one another was a young man and a young woman, and I got to chatting, and it turns out they were newly engaged and had decided to donate blood together, and they were both kind of nervous.
Oh, how
And
sweet.
it was just, they were charming, and it was a beautiful thing to do at the start of their life together, and it was just really sweet.
That's
And it's that kind of stuff.
lovely. Yeah, that is absolutely lovely. It really is.
I believe there's a great amount of beauty in blood donation.
Mhm.
And every time I speak with donors, there's beauty in what they have done, and there's beauty in that interaction. It's a gift to be among them.
Mm-hmm. When you were able to accept people like on a walk-in basis without appointments, which I understand is different now in COVID, but when people were able to do walk-ins, did you have people just do impulse blood donation? Does that happen? Or do people generally, sort of think about it and muse over it? And
What people do like is they like to know their blood's needed.
mm-hmm.
And it used to be that we would sometimes put the call out, hey, we need type O blood.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be folks attuned to that, and they would commit. And so it's not really an impulse. We're encouraging them by putting the word out that we need type O blood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a bit spur of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, sometimes, very powerfully, when we have mobile blood drives, say at a business,
Mm-hmm.
Your coworker might say, hey, I'm going to go give blood. Do you want to come with me?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that little bit of peer encouragement
Right.
in the moment to come donate blood. And that's a valuable thing. Today it's more difficult to be impulsive because we're appointment only.
Right.
But I'd like to use this as the opportunity to emphasize just how powerful it is when you ask another person who's close to you, it could be a friend, it could be a family member, but somebody that's close to you. It is very powerful when you ask them if they'll donate blood, either with you or with you in spirit if you can't actually go together.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few things in our society where asking somebody to do it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Voting is one of them. So if someone close to you asks you, hey, have you voted today? If not, will you please go vote? You're much more likely to do it
Nice.
than any other prompt,
Wow.
any other influence. That's the most powerful.
Okay.
And blood donation's the same.
Wow.
If someone close to you says, hey, will you go donate today, or will you make your appointment to donate today? You're much more likely to do it. So my plea to your listeners is, if you're a donor, make your appointment, keep your appointment, and ask a friend or family member to make their appointment too.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense to me. That would be one of those moments where you just need that nudge. We all know it's a
Yeah.
good thing to do. We all know we should do it. We just don't make time for it. So if somebody just pokes us a little bit, we'll go get it done.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So you have a podcast called Bloodworks 101. Can you tell me a little bit about what you cover in your podcast?
Boy, we cover a lot. The podcast was originally developed by my colleague John Yeager, and he conducts the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're usually about 10 to 20 minutes long, and they cover a really wide variety of topics, from some topics pertinent to the pandemic and our production of convalescent plasma,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through to topics around research and some of the research into the blood that we do, and where some of our research scientists focus their energies, as well as how their careers have developed. And we talk to members of the community as well. And it's an opportunity for us to communicate in accessible, interesting ways aspects of the work that's done on behalf of the community, in hopes that it excites people and causes them to say, wow, that's really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
We'd love for people to be part of it as a donor.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, Shannon, we'd love people to also work for us. So if our podcasts also help encourage folks to apply to work at Bloodworks, we think that's a really valuable thing too.
Oh, lovely. Okay. That's great to know. So if you're interested in working for Bloodworks, go check their website, listen to their podcast. Yeah, there's a wide range of topics on there. And it's funny because it's one of those things where you feel like, oh, I just want to listen to this one episode because this is pertinent to a question I have, but it's very engaging. And so you find yourself listening to several. Like, this is not really relevant to me, but I'm going to listen to it anyway because I think it's fascinating. So yeah, it's great. There's a nice balance there's good science in there that's just fascinating on its own. So what's Macklemore really like? I may or may not.
So this was one of the questions, Shannon, that I couldn't answer.
Oh, nuts.
I don't know.
Oh,
I think he's wonderful.
Picture.
I enjoy. He's got great music, and he's a terrific supporter of so many things, including blood donation. So I am a big fan of Macklemore, and perhaps someday he and I'll be buddies, but
there
not
you
yet.
Go. Okay, well, shout out to him anyway. So, all right. So my next question is, if I'm ready to donate, is there anything I need to do to prepare, to recover, or is it just go in, get it done? Maybe don't go for a long run after. Like, what are the rules around that?
It's really pretty simple. Hydrate,
Mm-hmm.
and then before you come in to donate, and then after you donate, stay hydrated, make sure you're eating, and get plenty of rest.
Right.
And if you do that, you're going to be feeling great throughout your day of donation and then afterwards. So it's really very simple things that, honestly, we're supposed to hydrate, eat well, and get plenty of rest anyhow. So maybe it'll reinforce those good habits.
Right. And I would like to say, as someone with very small, thin veins, that hydration thing will save you so much trouble. It makes your veins plumper, right? Easier to find.
It sure does. And if you really want to have, well, so Shannon, I'll tell you another silly story since I haven't held myself back. I didn't hold myself back from telling silly stories before, but
great.
You know how long it takes to donate blood. We actually time it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you donate whole blood, as soon as the blood donation begins, the timer starts, and we know how long it takes. And you can look down on the little device, which is right next to the blood bag, and you can see how long it takes.
Right.
So some people are competitive, and there are people who track their time.
Okay.
And in fact, attempt to beat their time the next time they donate. And there are even people who compete with others on who can donate faster.
Really?
And I have done a few of these competitions with my friend Brett Beardall, who's the CEO of WaFed. He has thoroughly trounced me each time, but I'm up for a rematch.
Awesome.
And one of the things that I just have not been good about is I don't hydrate prior to those donations when I'm competing against Brent. And the trick is to drink your weight in ounces of water the day before, and you will have a really easy and very fast donation.
Wow. So and you're not diluting your blood, I take it.
No.
Like, am I just giving you pure water at this point, or?
No.
Okay, phew, that didn't make sense to me, but okay, that's good. Good to know. Interesting. So I was actually going to ask you this: does people's blood flow at roughly the same rate? Apparently not.
Yes. I mean, it's not vastly different,
Right.
but there is some variety, some difference, yes.
Okay. Okay. That's great. So which are your universals, donors and recipients, and is that still relevant the way that I was always taught that?
Yeah, it's very much relevant.
It is.
So type O, in a sense, doesn't really mean type O. It means type 0. And the reason is because it means you have none of the A antigens or the B antigens expressed on the surface of your blood cells.
Okay.
And so it's type 0 means, or type O means you don't have those.
Okay.
And as a consequence, those red blood cells can be transfused into a person who may have one or each of those antigens,
Okay.
and there will not be a negative reaction
Okay.
of your body thinking a foreign substance has just been put into it,
Gotcha.
because it's the A and the B antigens that your body recognizes if you don't have them and attacks them.
Okay.
You can put type O into a type O patient, but you can also put it into a type B patient, and you can put it into a type A patient, because even though they would react to the antigen that they don't have,
Hmm.
type O blood doesn't have the antigen anyway.
Right.
And so it's safe to transfuse. So
Okay.
then you might say, well, what about type AB?
Hmm.
Well, in the case of type AB, because they have the A and the B, they're kind of a universal recipient,
Got it.
because you can give them anything, and they can take the A, they can take the B, they can take the AB, or they can take the O, and their body doesn't recognize it as foreign because they've got AB blood.
Got it. Okay.
The type O blood, therefore, is the most often transfused, because if you're not sure of the blood type of a patient, you'll give them type O. And in the case of a trauma, for example, where you don't have time to get a blood type on the patient, because that can take 15 to 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
you'll transfuse them with type O. And then, of course, there's a lot of type O humans.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of type Os in the population. So that's by far the largest blood group for transfusion.
Got it. Okay.
This is the moment in this dialogue that I have where I have to say, but wait, we need all types. And
Right. Yeah.
if you're not type O, that's fine. Come on down anyway.
Right.
And there's lots of A positive patients out in the world. There's lots of type B patients out in the world. So we need blood of all types.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing is that we also need people who will donate platelets.
Mm-hmm.
And while platelets do have quote unquote types to them,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as relevant. And so we don't always match the blood type when we transfuse a platelet. You don't always have to do that.
Okay.
And so if you're, say, type A positive, and there's a lot of A positive donors, we might ask you to consider, well, donate platelets today instead of whole blood. And a platelet donation is a really important thing. And if we have the need for platelets and you're an A-pos donor, for example, it's a great alternative. And there's a patient out there who's going to be really grateful that you did so.
Great. Learning so much today. This is amazing. What is the biggest myth about blood donation that you would like the world to get rid of?
The biggest myth about blood donation seems to be that there's artificial blood.
Oh.
There is not artificial blood.
Mm-hmm.
It is unlikely there will be artificial blood used in any meaningful fashion in the near future. The blood that goes into patients comes from other humans.
Mm-hmm.
And it circles really back to the beginning of our conversation today, where one of the wonders of our society and of medicine is that we have collectively decided to create an opportunity for patients to live because they can get transfused with this gift from a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And we've created this idea in society that giving a part of your body to someone you'll never meet is a beautiful thing that hundreds of thousands or millions of people will do every year. And I think that's extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely extraordinary.
I agree. Well, Curtis Bailey of Bloodworks Northwest, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I love this message. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like people to know?
I don't think so, Shannon. I think we really covered it. It was a terrific set of questions.
Oh, well, thank you. My own curiosity is what makes my job such a pleasure for me.
Yeah, and you framed things so nicely. It was really a fun interview. Thank you for making it so enjoyable, but also interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you. This has been great. And I will leave with the encouragement to everybody that's listening to please make an appointment, keep an appointment, take a friend.
Thank you, Shannon.
And thank you again. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.
You too. Many thanks to Kurt Bailey of Bloodworks Northwest, and a reminder to please check out bloodworksnw.org to set an appointment to donate. And remember, it works really well to invite a friend. All blood types are welcome and needed every month of the year, not just during National Blood Donor Month. But this is a really good time to get into the habit. Also, if you think a podcast would be a good resource for your company or organization, sign up for a free consultation at audiotocracy.com. That's AUDIOTOCRACY.com. My name is Shannon Perry, and I thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.